Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to today's show. I have an announcement that I'll get to in just a little bit. May not have time to do the recipe this week. I don't know. Usually I can work in a recipe. We'll see about it. But before I get to any of that, before the announcement, before anything, we're going to change things a little bit for this show. I have been basing all the last shows for the last year or so, probably longer than that, on my book, The Encyclopedia of Bitter Herbs. And we wrapped it up with turmeric. Of course, that's not all the herbs that have a bitter flavor, but that book was, gosh, what, 500 pages? I mean, 400 some pages, yeah. And I mean, I had to stop at some point. There may be a Bitter Herbs Volume 2 sometime down the line. We'll see. But, if you enjoyed this series, please do buy my book, The Encyclopedia of Medicinal Bitter Herbs. It really has not been a great seller, I guess, because people see the word bitter and they think, oh, I don't like bitter things. Well, but actually, if you've enjoyed these shows, that those bitter herbs are among the most interesting medicinal herbs of which we know. Well, along those lines, there are very many useful herbs that are considered weeds here in the United States. And most of what are considered weeds are invasive plants or plants that were brought here by other people. Well, why were they brought here? Well, they were brought here to be used as food and medicine. And so our so-called weeds, dandelion and plantain, et cetera, tend to be among our most potent medicinal herbs and some of our most nutritious food. And I wrote a whole book on this. It's called The Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast, an Herbalist's Guide. Frankly, I think it's probably one of the most important herb books written in many years, because instead of spraying all these weeds with, Roundup and other chemicals, we could just take advantage of the bounty that our ancestors provided for us in bringing these plants here. But, that's not our culture. We live in stupid times. You play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. If you play the stupid game of having a perfectly green, grassy lawn and nothing to eat, you get the stupid prize of having a perfectly green, grassy lawn and nothing to eat. You then have to pay someone else for your food. If that's your priority, hey, it's a free country, go for it. That's so not my priority. I want a yard full of edible and medicinal plants. I like to focus on, independence and self-sufficiency and just being able to take care of myself. I don't depend on, as little as possible, do I depend on other people for my needs. Because frankly, most of them are not competent. If you doubt me, go see what kind of quality and education a child is getting in a public school from professional teachers. they're graduating functionally illiterate and unable to do basic math, but your tax dollars are paying a professional person with degrees to teach them, when probably your dog could do a better job. I mean, seriously, you can learn more from a dog than you can in a public school. I mean, and I say that as one who grew up with a lot of dogs. And yes, I learned many good life lessons, such as loyalty and kindness and protectiveness and honesty. I learned a lot more from dogs than I was ever taught anything in school. I mean, I was not taught to read in school. My mother had to teach me how to read. Teachers didn't realize I was dyslexic. They thought I was dumb. Yeah. I my IQ's in the 150s, so who was the dumb one there? You know, nowadays you're lucky if your kid can get through high school without overdosing on fentanyl or having their bits cut off. Anyway, again, if you don't believe that you need to be self-sufficient, go to a doctor. See what kind of quality health care you get these days. Not good. I don't go to doctors anymore. I haven't been to a doctor in more than 20 years. All of my family members who have died in the past 20 years suffered from malpractice, just bad care, mistakes, or outright medical abuse. Outright abuse that led to their death. I mean, sometimes purposefully. I have one relative who complained that a nurse was stealing his pain medication and was put in a hospital room with a shared bathroom to a patient who had an antibiotic resistant infection. And surprise, surprise, within about 3 days, he got the antibiotic resistant infection and died. Uh, yeah. I have another relative who went in for prostate surgery, and the surgeon was drunk and cut an artery, and he bled out on the table. My grandmother, her doctor went out of town. The doctor that took over prescribed a medication that was contraindicated, and she was poisoned to death by the medications that the doctors gave her and that the nurses insisted she take, even though they were making her sick. She eventually had a heart attack and died from that. So obviously, obviously, I believe in taking care of myself for very good reasons. And I mean, we could go down the road of the DMV, or we could talk about, you know, even down to like going to the grocery store and you go to the produce section and half the stuff's rotten because the kids working there have no idea what they're doing. And then you get up to the cash register and, I mean, heaven forbid you give them change. They want you to just use that debit card or credit card if you actually pay with cash and change, because these kids can't do math. They're just like, I don't know what to do. If the computer doesn't tell me how much to give you back, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, that's the world we live in now. And that incompetence is from one end of the scale to the other. It's obviously, I mean, look at our freaking moronic president. Senile, desiccated, thoroughly corrupt moron of a president. You think he was actually elected? Yeah, I don't. I have no faith in our system whatsoever. Our elections, in our law enforcement, in our military. I mean, come on. There's a man in a dress in our military as what is? I mean, he's an officer. He doesn't even know what's between his legs. Do you honestly expect him to protect us from, I don't know, China or Russia? He can't even figure out that because he has a penis, he's a man. See how I say that, dogs are smarter than people these days? You won't find that problem with a dog. They know what they are. Anyway. So I wrote this book. Back to what I was actually talking about, right? I wrote this book called The Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American South. These weeds and grasses actually, I talk about my region because these are plants I have personal experience with. You'll find them pretty much throughout the continental United States and into Mexico and Canada and all that. This book had the potential, I think, to be, and still has the potential, I think, to be one of the most important and influential herb books written in this century. But Within days of it being rolled out, of announcing it, someone bought it on Amazon. Thank you to that person. But they then went and left me a very bad review. They complained that it doesn't have pictures. Well, I actually state that, in the description of the book. I say this is not a field guide. I'm telling you how to use these plants, not how to identify these plants. I would be much more comfortable if you were to get a Peterson field guide or use a phone app so that you can be sure of identification. Because in a book that's running about 400 pages, I don't have room for photos without making it cost prohibitive. And I like for someone to see the plant at different stages of growth and in different seasons. When you pick up a book and it's got a picture of a plant, well, that's that plant on that day. Okay, yeah, it's a dandelion. It's got a nice, pretty yellow flower. Okay, if that's the only way you know a dandelion is with that yellow flower, you don't know it in spring. You don't know it when it's got the puffy seed head on it. You don't know what it looks like when the seeds have been blown away. You know, I think if you're going to identify plants, you need to get good books on identifying plants or use a cell phone app, smartphone app. There are actually some really good ones out there. I don't use them, so I cannot actually recommend one. But people have told me that they are quite good. And see, I learned to forage from and wild harvest herbs from people who did it for a living. And so they taught me how to identify plants. I think if you want to learn to identify plants, the best thing to do is to get someone to show you and tell you who's actually done it for a couple of decades or more. I'm not, that's not what this book's about. And I said that specifically, and the person who I'm glad he bought my book, but he left me a terrible review and my book sales died. I mean, I don't think I've even sold 3 copies of this book because the only review on Amazon is a complaint and a 2-star review. I'm serious. I don't think I've sold more than 3 copies of this book. That is not what I intended. I intended everyone to have a copy of this book so that they would learn to learn to appreciate the plants around them and use them medicinally and for food. Bad reviews really hurt authors. Think about that before you leave a bad review. If you have bought this book, or if you would like to buy this book, gosh, I'd be thankful. I am, trying to make a living here, and I wrote it to help people. Please leave me a good review on Amazon. It would take about 10 good reviews to get me back up over 4 stars because he gave me a 2-star. That's the way it weights out. And even though it says right there in the description of the book, this book has no photos or illustrations, please use it with a field guide or a phone app. His complaint has killed my book sales. So, beginning with today's show, I'm going to start giving you descriptions of how to use these plants from this book, The Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast, an Herbalist Guide. If you enjoy medicinal bitter herbs, if you enjoy my weekly articles that I send out on, I've been doing medicinal trees and shrubs from another book. Before that, it was, Shrubs and Woody Vines. Before that, it was medicinal trees. They're very popular. I mean, hundreds, thousands of people read those articles. You know the quality of my work. I hope you'll buy the book and leave me a good review. If you can't buy the book, always I understand. I understand people's financial situations. I've been there. You can request your library to get a copy. That will allow more people to read it. And that, even though when a library buys a book, the author makes a lot less money, they get it at a deep discount, it still helps me out a little bit, and it helps out your community. I would love to see my books in more libraries, but that takes an actual person who has a library card from that library to fill out a form and request it. I, as the author, cannot request a library buy my book. That's against the rules. But anyway, I'm going to give you this information of the show, so you'll get it one show at a time, one way or another. But I just wanted to fill you in on that. Also, it would help me out a lot if you would recommend my podcast to other people. revenues are down for some reason. I'm not sure what's going on, but whereas I was making about a penny for every listen, which was just barely covering hosting for the podcast, now I seem to be making a half to two-thirds of a penny. So I'm actually losing money this month on the podcast. But, as long as I can break even and I sell a few books, I can afford to do it. If it starts really losing money, it's going to be an issue for me. So please recommend the podcast to other people. It would be great if I could see my numbers of the podcast double. So that's about what it's going to take to cover hosting this month. That's the money you pay to the company that puts the podcast on the internet. You have to pay them every month. And, please buy my books. But there's the other announcement is I like to carve things. I like to carve things out of wood, especially green wood. I enjoy making spoons and kitchen utensils, because I like to cook. I like to make useful items. A lot of people have been asking if they could buy them. So I started an online store, and it's actually I'm running it through my Substack newsletter. You're interested in owning one of my hand-carved wooden spoons, please go to judsoncarrollwoodcraft.substack.com and check them out. These, they're sustainably harvest wood. I take trees that have to be thinned or have been storm damaged, and everything's done by hand. I literally spend 2-3 hours taking a piece of wood, axing it out. Well, first of all, sawing it with a handsaw, then axing it out, and then with a couple of knives, turning it into I think, a very beautiful, useful object. These are heirloom quality. You could pass them down for generations. Each one of them, I'm sending a signed and numbered note. So if you'd like to have something with, from me, by me, if that matters to you. If it doesn't, you're still going to have a really beautiful spoon. I've come up with some very unique, artistic, but usable designs. All these are very functional. And they're really pretty, honestly. I'm using walnut oil to seal them, and walnut oil is unique because it actually polymerizes as it dries, so it makes the spoons waterproof, and you can use them right away, or you can display them. Um, they're Yeah, I mean they're really pretty, and I'm kind of proud of them because it's taken a long time to learn to do this with unique designs that are my own, and it gives me one more reason to be in the woods. So I really do enjoy it, and I've got the calluses and scars from cutting my hands to prove it. So if you'd like one of my spoons, um, and there'll be other things. I'm going to do breadboards, charcuterie boards. Oh, I'm doing, butter knives and jam spreaders, and there'll be a lot of stuff actually. If you want to just keep an eye on it, again, it's judsoncarrollwoodcraft.substack.com, and if you see something you like, yeah, please buy it. So anyway, let's get on with the show. And as I said, this is from the Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast, an Herbalist Guide. This book I published, I think it was about April of this year, and thanks to a bad review, I've sold like 3 copies. So again, I'm just going to say, look, if leave honest reviews, certainly leave honest reviews. But if you're ever on the edge, if you're ever like, on the bubble, I could go this way or that way, or, the book was good, but I have this complaint, um, think twice before you put a bad review down for an author, especially if they're self-published as I am. It can really hurt the person. I mean, it's not you're just saying, well, I wish the book had had photos. You leave a 2-star review saying this book sucks because it didn't have any photos. You just, you know, uh, made it real hard for that guy to, pay his bills and put food on the table, honestly. And Amazon will not remove the reviews either. I mean, even though I say in the description, no photos. So it's not a fair review, in my opinion. Amazon will not take it down. Only the author of that review can remove it, and the author of the book has no way of contacting the person who reviewed it. Amazon won't let that happen either. I can't just say to the guy, look, I'm sorry you feel this way. I'll give you your money back. Please take down the review. I can't do that. I would gladly do that because, anyway, you can probably tell I'm a little frustrated. and as laid back as I am. This is me frustrated, you know. All right, so let's get into some of these weeds that you probably have growing in your yard. And the first one that is interesting, it's just very short. The next one is much more, uh, well, we'll talk a lot more about it. So I'm going to talk about two herbs today. The first one is Acalypha virginica, also known as Virginia Copperleaf or Virginia three-seed Mercury. Okay. Whereas most plants that are considered weeds are invasive, this one is native. I have no idea why it's considered a weed. It is slightly toxic, okay? So handle with care. But this book actually has long use by Native Americans and in early America. And Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests tells us that a Dr. Atkins of Coosawhatchee, Georgia, found it to be very useful as an expectorant and diuretic and employed it successfully in cases of humid asthma and other such conditions. Okay, as I said, Acalypha virginica, Virginia copperleaf, or Virginia three-seed mercury is slightly toxic. Used with care, but don't think of it as just a weed, especially considering it's native. I mean, I don't even know how that one ends up in that category, but according to, I think yeah, the reference I used on that was North Carolina State University's Extension Service listed that as a weed. Who knows why? Yeah, I mean, you know, who knows? It just, I guess it's a pest in the garden is what it comes down to. But one that you absolutely need to know, and one we've actually talked about before, is Acacia yarrow. Okay, there are actually several varieties of yarrow that are considered weeds. You have ornamental yarrows. They can be yellow and pink and different colors that you might grow in your flower garden. You can have the wild yarrow that grows all over my yard with white flowers. But oddly enough, again, this very useful and edible plant that has a history of use going back thousands of years is considered by the extension agencies and the universities and all the master gardeners and people that tell you what you should and shouldn't grow in your yard, even though it's wild, a weed. Okay? Specifically the Acacia philippindulina, fern leaf yarrow. Well, um, that's what grows all over my yard, and I love it. And actually, it's quite tasty. It has a bitter, peppery flavor, and a lot of people use it as a culinary herb as well as being a medicinal herb. In fact, my friend in Austria, Jolanta Wittib, we wrote the Herbs and Weeds of Father Johann Kunzel together. She gathers it and uses it in food. And after talking with her about that, I've started using it more. A lot of times I'll just be like in the yard and I'll pick some and eat it. Very good liver tonic, good for the stomach, good digestive. But it does have a very unique kind of bitter peppery flavor, and it's quite good. Quite good, in fact. I've been studying a lot of the ancient Roman cooking. Um, Apicius, by the way, a couple of shows ago I called him Apicius. Well, it's not Apicius. I finally learned from an Italian friend how to pronounce his name. It's Apicius, and he wrote dining in, well, I can't remember the actual title of his book. It's an old, I mean, you know, old ancient Roman cookbook. Officially, it's one of the oldest cookbooks in the Western world. And they used a lot of tansy and other bitter herbs that can be a little toxic, can be a little dangerous. These herbs that they used, while they do have this kind of peppery, bitterish flavor, should never be used by pregnant women. They can cause a miscarriage. Can actually be dangerous for anyone in large amounts, but they only used a little here and a little there. I have found that yarrow has a very similar flavor to herbs such as that. that could be dangerous, but yarrow is a lot safer. So when I've been cooking through Apicius's dishes, sometimes I've been substituting yarrow, and I found it to be quite good. I think at some point I will have to do some kind of video series or something on ancient Roman cooking and ancient Greek cooking. You'll be really surprised. I mean, if you've never gotten into this stuff, it's going to really blow you away. Um, Very different. Ancient Roman cooking is extremely different from modern Italian food, what you might call from the Neapolitan era. Ancient Roman food from the BC times, um, is actually flavor-wise a little bit more like Chinese food. It combines all these elements of sweet, sour, salty, bitter, savory, etc. The umami flavor. They had a fish sauce they called garum, which is just like the fish sauce you use in Thai food. Um, Similar actually to soy sauce or Worcestershire sauce. The flavors they were combining would really surprise you. I think that ancient Roman cooking was far more of an influence on classical French food than it really is on Italian food. And yeah, it's good. I mean, it's it's sophisticated. It's simple at the same time. When something's both sophisticated and simple, you call it elegant. It's rustic, but it's by no means. I mean, it's light years apart from like English food, which is simple but bland. This is simple but heavily seasoned with herbs and spices, and quite good. They use large cuts of meat. They use whole fish. So I mean, it's simple. It's rustic, but and they use a lot of wild plants and herbs. So it is rustic, but the flavors are really they're going to surprise you. They're really going to. We'll get in, I'm going to have to get into that at some point. Look for that soon. Maybe next spring as the garden starts to come in, and the freezer's full of some fish and game between now and then, and maybe I can start doing some videos on that. There actually are some very good ones on YouTube. Ancient Roman cooking. You can check that out. There are three that I really like. I can't remember the names of any of them right now, but you'll be impressed. You'll be very impressed. Anyway, let's get back to yarrow. Yarrow, as one of the common names was soldier's woundwort. Well, Acacia or the yarrow family is really one of the most storied herbs in history. Um, I think probably every herbalist that goes to any kind of herb school hears the old legend that Achilles used it to treat soldiers wounded in battle, or even to treat his own heel that was wounded. That's where the name Achalia comes from. It comes from Achilles. That story comes from the Iliad of Homer. I love the Odyssey and the Iliad. Homer was actually according to modern historians who looked at it, probably a physician and a military physician as well. So he was actually using yarrow to stop bleeding for injured soldiers. And that's probably why he included that story in the Iliad. So when we look at our herbal historians and heroes, yeah, actually Homer, the guy who wrote the Odyssey, was a practicing herbalist. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I love those books in school. Absolutely loved the Odyssey. The official one, the one that's usually grown in the garden and used in official medicine is, I think, was it millifolia? It means million segmented leaves. Well, they're fringe-like. They're fern-like or fringe-like leaves. But the Philippindulina, which is the one that's considered a weed, at least in my area, can be used absolutely interchangeably. Dioscorides wrote of it as millifolious. Again, that's the million, segmented leaves, essentially. He described it and, said how it was very useful to stop bleeding. He said the herb is excellent for an excessive discharge of blood, old and new ulcers, and for fistulas, ulcerated sores, essentially. This is, Well, it's important to point out, as a soldier's or wound herb, it would have been applied directly to the wound. You would have dried, preferably, flowers and leaves. You put it on essentially as a poultice, and it would be styptic in helping to dry and cause the clotting of the wound, as well as shrinking the blood vessels to slow the bleeding. It can also be used internally. Yarrow is very good for, say, excessive menstrual flow. Also used for internal bleeding. Best used in that case as a cold tea. If you're going to use yarrow internally, as a hot tea, doesn't do much good. As a cold, and it can actually cause bleeding to increase. It's interesting in that way. Sage is very similar. Um, and actually, the two herbs have a similar flavor, sage and yarrow, by the way. So it's a way we can kind of understand the properties of herbs sometimes is by their flavor. But remember, the cold tea works best. Now, yarrow does have some uses as a hot tea, good for sore throats and fevers and all that. But for bleeding especially, cold tea. And again, sage is the exact same way. Yarrow was widely used by ancient Greeks and Romans, and of course was used in the monastic medicine of the Middle Ages. Uh, Saint Hildegard von Bingen recommended yarrow applied to the eyelids for vision darkened by tears. I'm, okay. I don't understand. I cannot give you a medical terminology for vision darkened by tears, but I don't know. I guess if the vision starts to become dim, if you start losing your eyesight and you're depressed, you're sad, I don't know. But she said yarrow was specifically good applied to the eyelids. She also used it to stop bleeding and recognized its antiseptic properties against infected wounds. She recommended it used externally for wounds and internally for internal bleeding. She also recommended it taken infused in wine for fevers. Yarrow's use of staunching blood has been obviously known since the time of the Greeks, and but Saint Hildegard's recommending it against fevers shows her advanced knowledge of herbal medicine, because that was not part of the ancient Greek tradition. She recommended yarrow combined with dill, plain garden dill, like you make dill pickles with, to stop nosebleeds. And yes, very good for nosebleeds. Father Nape combined yarrow with St. John's wort and linden flowers or basswood. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. The linden, the basswood, the lime tree they often call it in Europe, but it's not a citrus. It's actually a deciduous tree. He recommended it for coughs and congestions. His protege, brother Aloysius, recommended yarrow for weakness and mucus in the digestive organs, for lung complaints, internal cramps, heavy bleeding, piles, irregular menstruation, nervous complaints, insomnia, the consequences of self-abuse. Um, I think he's talking masturbation, and I'm not sure how that helps. But okay. Um, I'm not even going to get into that. I'm not going to speculate on it, but that's what he said in his book. Back pain caused by piles, internal and external ulcers, intestinal complaints, stomach cramps, stomach ache, leukorrhea, lung complaints, bleeding lungs, chills, rheumatism, fresh sores, scrofulous sores, and fistula. Wow, a lot. Okay, so I'm going to venture this much of a guess on that topic without getting too graphic. Um, if yarrow is astringent and shrinks capillaries to reduce bleeding, it could help a man somewhat with sexual performance. We'll just go down that. We'll go that far with it. All right, so Maria Trebin, continuing in the German folk medicine tradition, which comes directly from monastic medicine, which comes directly from Greek and Roman medicine. German folk medicine, in my opinion, is the most informed, intact system of herbalism in the Western world. I think it is absolutely on par with traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. and thoroughly Christian, and really, really should be a major school of herbal medicine. Um, but it isn't because people have forgotten about it. We need to bring it back. That's one of the reasons I wrote that book with Jolanta. Father Kunzel was, one of the greats of the German folk medicine tradition, and actually probably the only reason that herbalism remained legal in Europe, because as the socialists and fascists and Nazis and all were taking over the Germanic-speaking world, they wanted to outlaw folk medicine. They wanted only licensed doctors approved by the state to be able to practice. And he was taken to court. This is a priest who used herbs to help people. He proved in I think it was a German court. He was Swiss, but I believe it was a German court, that his herbs were more effective for treating diabetes than the medicines of the doctors. And that legalized herbal medicine in the Germanic world. And at the same time, America was trying to outlaw herbal medicine with the Pure Foods and Drugs Act and all that. Doctors did not want competition from herbalists. And yes, there were some, probably some bad formulas out there that were more moonshine than cough syrup. Anyway, had it not been for Father Kunzel, herbal medicine probably would have been completely stamped out throughout Europe and America. It made it entirely illegal to practice herbal medicine in France. Uh, Maurice Messague was taken to court on almost an annual basis. They kept trying to prevent him from practicing herbalism in France. And had he not had among his clients kings and queens and the Prime Minister of England, Winston Churchill, and some of the most powerful and wealthy people in the world, he would have been put in prison in France because it was completely made illegal to be an herbalist, to be a practicing herbalist. England really followed suit, and had it not been for Maud Grieve in the 1930s writing a modern herbal, we really could have lost all knowledge of herbal medicine in England. We would only be looking at books from the 15 and 1600s, not the home remedies and such that the common man was using well into the 1900s. And the only reason her book was really took off and was influential is because they were in the midst of two world wars back to back, and people had to learn to treat themselves. Soldiers on the field needed treatment, people at home needed treatment, and doctors and pharmaceuticals were not as available as they had been before. The same, very much true in other areas. That's why herbal medicine was so important in the Appalachians, among Native American tribes, among the Mormons. Uh, necessity. Uh, Russia has a fantastic legacy of herbal medicine. And basically because Russia under communism was so poor, people were starving, the Russian government realized people couldn't afford to go to doctors. So they actually invested taxpayer money into preserving the tradition of Russian herbal medicine because people were at starvation level poverty because of communism. We really do owe our herbal tradition very much to poor rural people. And in German folk medicine, that was the goal of Father Nape and Kunzel and Brother Aloysius. They wanted people just to be able to take care of themselves at home. They wanted the common man to have access to the herbs that God gave us to heal them and not to suffer and die because they couldn't afford to go to a doctor. And, it was very much a charitable act for them to write those classic books. Well, Maria Treben in Austria in the 1970s and 80s is the one who really gave German folk medicine to the world. After World War II, most Americans would not be caught dead with a book written in German or by a German and translated to English in their house. Anti-German sentiment understandably really high. I mean, people, you know, for a while people didn't even want to eat hamburgers because of Hamburg, Germany, or they had, before it was Frankfurters, they changed the name to hot dogs because they didn't want to be associated with Frankfurt. I mean, uh, and really, I mean, of course, the horrors of World War II is quite understandable. So German and German immigrants in America did stop speaking German, change their last names. A lot of them wanted to give up all their traditions, and they wanted to just become, regular Americans. Well, um, German folk medicine was largely lost because of that until Maria Treben brought it back to us. And she wrote, it's a long way of getting around to this point. I know I do tend to wander a bit, don't I? She said that yarrow was particularly good for intestinal cancer. This is, I never recommend anything for cancer. It's just too serious an issue. But Maria Treben said it was a young mother of 5, and the doctor had given her only a few more days. I recommended compresses applied to the area of the intestines. At the same time, calamus root steeped in cold water overnight, 1 level teaspoon per cup of water. 1 sip before and after each meal, and a tea made from equal portions of stinging nettle, calendula, and yarrow. At least 2 liters of this tea have to be sipped throughout the day. Today, this woman is in much better health, and there is hope of her complete recovery. Ms. Treben always recommended calamus for any intestinal condition, by the way. She used European calamus, which actually has some carcinogenic properties. American calamus does not. Especially if one has a concern with cancer, we want to stay away from carcinogenic substances. Definitely stay away from European calamus if you have the option of using American calamus. Uh, Calamus is another weed, by the way. It grows with cattails down by the creek and the pond. And it's another of our most storied and effective herbs. But it's fantastic for any intestinal condition, including irritable bowel and colitis. I have recommended it for such before to someone who knew who had those issues, and it cleared it right up. Whenever they have a problem, calamus, just chew the root and eat it. It's peppery and bitter, and actually also an interesting culinary herb. And yarrow tea or sage tea. I use those interchangeably very often, taken cold. And another very good herb, which is a weed that we cover in this book as well, is erigeron, Canada fleabane. Fantastic for colitis or irritable bowel. As always, I'm not giving medical advice, but I know someone who had a really bad problem, and medicine was not helping. And they said, "What can I do?" And I said, "Well, I know of some astringent and antispasmodic herbs that could help. Here's a list. Give them a try." And the person is now 100% better. And when they have a flare up, they use those herbs. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not recommending anything. She goes on and says a woman from, I guess this is Heilbronn, West Germany, wrote, what did she say? 10 months ago, my 41-year-old nephew who lives in Sacramento wrote in his letter that he suffers from bleeding at the colon daily, and the medical diagnosis is without a doubt cancer of the colon. A side opening would be necessary. It's pretty serious. I sent him your book, Help Through God's Pharmacy, and Swedish bitters, calamus root, calendula, yarrow, and stinging nettles. He followed the instructions in your book. Today, my nephew was able to work again. After taking the mentioned herbs for 4 days, the bleeding stopped. Tiredness and loss of weight were arrested slowly. Very important, obviously. I mean, that's serious when you're talking colonoscopy. I mean, and in the 80s, 70s even, that would have been even worse. Medical science has advanced a little bit in terms of surgery. And again, I never recommend anything for cancer, but this is what Maria Treben wrote. And that combination, calamus, calendula, yarrow, stinging nettle, Uh, the yarrow is astringent. The calamus is antispasmodic and just really soothes the intestines. Calendula is always soothing for anything. And well, so is stinging nettle, but it's also very nutritive. I think it's important there that she mentions the Swedish bitters because that would have been a general tonic for the digestive system. And the Swedish bitters contains all these herbs. It has yarrow, it has calamus in it, and 22, 23 other herbs. There's a little valerian in there that's also antispasmodic, etc. I think that, well, I don't see how it could do much harm, any harm at all, and I think it would help a great deal, and obviously it did in this case. I think that would be a very good protocol, in fact. Sophie Hodderwick's Nab tells us of the Polish tradition. In the Middle Ages, yarrow was grown in Poland in the gardens of the monasteries of the Dominicans and Benedictines. Yarrow was an herb used by the monks in the free hospitals they opened throughout the world, anywhere they could, as medicine. That's actually how we have our modern hospitals and medical schools. They all come from the tradition of monastic medicine, and that's a big way that Christianity spread throughout the world was by operating those hospitals. So the history of herbal medicine and Christianity are inseparable. I've written a whole book on that. Talked about it last week. You know what I'm talking about. The history and practice of Christian herbal medicine. Please buy that book too, if you can. It's another one that has not sold very well. I mean, it's amazing how I think my best books, the most useful and helpful books, are the ones that don't sell as well. I mean, I guess I understand why someone, if they're not Christian, would not want to buy the history and practice of Christian herbal medicine. I would still think any herbalist would want to have it on their shelves, and I would certainly think any Christian would want to have it so they can show to their children and grandchildren and neighbors and everybody that herbal medicine does have this rich Christian history. But, whatever. I got a bad review on that one too, straight out the door. Someone said it was all about mysticism and tried to make it out to be like some kind of woohoo new age book, and it's anything but. It's actually a defense of the history, practical history of Christian herbal medicine against the new age movement. But that was someone who figured out how to harm my book sales in a way that my readers would buy. I mean, they could fool people. That was someone who was intentionally trying to do me harm, and they succeeded. Yeah. Did finally get enough people who bought it who gave good reviews so that one doesn't pop up at the top. But for the first year, I sold basically no copies of that book because someone maliciously left a bad review. And again, Amazon wouldn't remove it. I complained and complained and complained. I said, this is a malicious review that is untrue. It's not any word of truth in this review. And they said, our policy says that it stands. So, hey, maybe God willing, someday we'll have an alternative to Amazon for independent authors. But right now we don't. And yeah, those reviews really hurt an author. That's all I can say. But anyway, in the Middle Ages, yarrow was grown in Poland and the garden monasteries of the Dominican and Benedictines. An ancient Polish herbalist known as Marcin of Urzdow. I mean, I don't speak Polish. Urzdow suggests poultices of yarrow for inflamed and pus-filled wounds. Cyrenius, another Polish name, suggested its use for bleeding, diarrhea, and pain in the intestines. He suggested the herb is good boiled in wine and taken for colic and biting in the stomach. Mashed and applied to the body, it will stop nosebleeds and decrease tooth pain if the root is chewed. Very important. I should have mentioned that. Yes, yarrow root is excellent for toothaches. In fact, I guess it was Michael Moore. Yeah, the herbalist Michael Moore said it was an old folk remedy that he just kind of stumbled across. He went into an old general store and they had yarrow roots preserved in brandy. And the guy explained that whenever someone had toothache, they'd buy one and they put it in there next to the tooth, next to the gum, and it would numb it out. Fantastic for that purpose. Really good. Definitely, and not a very well known use of yarrow, but it was known in Poland, at least in the Middle Ages. She goes on and says, country women rubbed the fresh herb in their hands and applied it to bleeding areas to stop the flow of blood. The juice squeezed from the leaves was applied to open sores and fresh wounds. Boiled in white wine, it was considered a medication for vaginal discharge. A salve was made for wounds, ulcers, and fistulas. The powdered dry leaf was smoked like tobacco to cure headaches. That's another very interesting use that I've never tried that. In the 18th century, extracts and oils made from yarrow were sold in apothecary shops across Poland. And she mentions it's one of the herbs blessed on August 15, the feast of Our Lady of the Herbs. So if you're Catholic or you're Orthodox, the 15th is a very important day. It's actually, for Catholics, a day of obligation, meaning we have to go to church. and it's the Assumption. It's when the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary is observed. And in Poland and several other Central European traditions, it's also considered the feast day of Our Lady of the Herbs. This is when a lot of herbs and flowers are taken to church to be blessed by the priest and dedicated for use in healing, going back 2,000-year-old tradition saying that the Blessed Virgin Mary was an herbalist, and there are many herbs that are named for her. There are many legends, from milk thistle to sage, you name it. Many herbs associated with the Mother of God. Turning to the British tradition, yarrow is called, Gerard. Gerard says that the leaves of yarrow do close up wounds and keep them from inflammation. It's stanchious, I guess. He means it stops the bleeding in any part of the body. And likewise put into baths for women to sit in, stops the lask, and being drunk helpeth the bloody flux. So we're talking, vaginal discharge and excessive bleeding, essentially. Men say that the leaves chewed, especially green, are a remedy for the toothache. So in Gerard's time, they were actually using the leaves for toothache. The leaves being put in the nose, stop a nosebleed. Yeah, very, very common use. All right, here we get into this one again. You remember what we tried to speculate with Brother Aloysius? Well, let's see what Gerard said in the 1500s in Elizabethan English and see if it either makes it more clear or more confusing. It cureth the inward excoriations of the yard of a man, coming by reason of pollutions or extreme flowing of the seed, although the issue do cause inflammation and swelling in those secret parts, and though spermatic matter do come down in great quantity, if the juice be injected with a syringe or the decoction, this hath been proved hath been proved by a certain friend of mine, sometimes a fellow at King's College in Cambridge, who lightly bruised the leaves of common yarrow with hog's grease, and applied it warm unto the privy parts, and thereby did divers times help himself, and others of his fellows, when he was a student and a single man living in Cambridge. First of all, let's not even get into the part about the syringe. That's just, But, so apparently, single male students at Cambridge had a certain problem due to being single male students at Cambridge when no women were allowed at the school, and found a either a bath with yarrow or a salve made with yarrow and hog's lard to be effective. I'm just gonna leave that one there. That's yeah. Anyway, he says 1 dram of the powdered herb given in wine taketh away the pains of the colic. And that would be it. He specifically means like intestinal cramping, essentially. And there's so much more to say about yarrow. And gosh, we've gone on quite a while about this plant, getting close to an hour. So I'm going to want to cut this off in the next few minutes. Miss Grieve really gets into it. I'll just skip down. She goes through all the history and rhymes and ways people used to learn about the herb. Um, um, For specific medicinal actions and uses, she said yarrow tea is a good remedy for severe colds, being most useful in the commencement of fevers and cases of obstructive perspiration. In other words, it'll help you break a fever. It helps cause perspiration. That in that case, it's better than sage because sage prevents or decreases perspiration. By the way, unless it's taken as a hot tea. Um, the infusion made. Well, we don't need that. And she also says it's good if you add a little cayenne pepper to your yarrow tea to help break a fever. Also purifies the blood, good for children's coughs, measles, and other eruptive disorders. Good for bleeding piles or hemorrhoids, kidney disorders, and it has a reputation of being a preventative of baldness if the head be washed with it. Hey, you learn something new every day. Uh, Yarrow for baldness. Wow. Um, I know sage also has that same reputation. Sage tea keeps the hair from turning gray. It keeps it dark and can help with baldness. Helps stop it or slow it. John Kehoe in Ireland said it's very astringent, of course. Drinking a decoction stops dysentery and excessive menstrual and other flows. Bruised and applied to wounds. It stops and prevents inflammations and swelling. Taken in white wine, remedy for colic. Again, that's going to be intestinal cramping. And he says nothing is more effectual against piles or hemorrhoids, taken inwardly or applied outwardly. If applied to the pit of the stomach in a plaster with grated nutmeg, it is beneficial for fevers. How in the world did anybody figure that out? Grated nutmeg at the pit of the stomach. Who knows? I have no idea. Cloverleaf Farms Encyclopedia of Herbal Encyclopedia says the Druids used it. Chinese used it even to tell the future. Druids had some ceremonial use. Aztecs used the plant in poultice for sores and for coughs, diarrhea, etc. Used by many Native American tribes. And then this would be the weedy, the wild one, the one they don't want you to grow for some reason. Crazy. Iroquois made a tea from the root to treat diarrhea. The many tribes used it for compresses, treat bleeding, washes for skin irritations, burns, eczemas, hives, poison ivy, and a poultice treat wounds. Um, Wow. I mean, I've got so much information just on this one plant in this book. I mean, it's actually kind of mind-boggling. And for modern use, I'm just going to tell you what Plants for Future says. They say it is used in the treatment of a very wide range of disorders, but particularly valuable for treating wounds, stopping the flow of blood, treating colds, fevers, kidney diseases, and menstrual pain, etc. The whole plant is used both fresh and dried, best harvested when in flower. Some caution should be exercised in the use of this herb since large amounts or frequent doses taken over a long period may be potentially harmful, causing allergic reactions and rashes, making the skin sensitive to sunlight, like St. John's wort does. The herb combines well with elderflower and mints and peppermint, especially for treating colds and influenzas. The herb is antiseptic, antispasmodic, mildly aromatic, astringent, carminative, cholagogue, diaphoretic, digestive, emmenagogue. Well, okay, so the last four just means it basically helps settle stomach. Of course, emmenagogue means it brings on menses. Can also help reduce excessive menses. So it just depends on how it's used. Stimulant, bitter tonic, vasodilator, and vulnerary. Vulnerary means it helps heal wounds, and my vasodilator means just dilates veins. I think you can figure that out. It also contains the anti-inflammatory agent azoline. The content of this varies between plants in the same habitat. Um, the fresh leaf can be applied directly to an aching tooth in order to relieve the pain. Well, so can the root, as Michael Moore explained. So, wow, huh? I mean, this so-called weed can literally save your life by stopping bleeding, help with a toothache, help with diarrhea, indigestion. I mean, it's a panacea that your state government's agricultural service wants you to eradicate. So, again, how much do we trust government? None. Very little. Raise your hand if you said not at all. Okay. And wish we didn't have to pay for it. Tired of having our money taken and given to lazy bureaucrats who only make our lives worse. All right, so among the amazing attributes of yarrow to me, and this is one that just blows my mind. So, I keep my yard fairly wild, but there is a patch of grass in the front that I do keep mowed. Okay, I cut the grass so the neighbors don't complain. Not that I really have more than one or two neighbors that's going to wander away, but wander by every now and then. But my mother's going to complain if she comes up there and sees the tall grass. For some reason, she thinks wherever there's tall grass, there's snakes. Well, we don't have any poisonous snakes, but I just keep it mowed. Okay, it's easier to do that than have to talk about it. There's a lot of yarrow growing there, and it's the wild yarrow. It's the one they want you to get rid of, and it's the one I use mostly. Fantastic. It's very strong, very potent. I think the weedy wild yarrows are far more potent than anything you grow in a garden that's grown for looks. When I started cutting the grass, I was so worried. I didn't want to lose this, that's where most of my yarrow grows because it's a nice sunny spot. I didn't want to lose it, so I went out and I harvested a bunch and I just grudgingly cut the grass, right? Well, the yarrow came right back. The next time I cut the grass, the yarrow came right back. By the time I had cut the grass 3 times, the yarrow had adapted and was now growing sideways. It would come up about 2 inches and then grow sideways across the ground to avoid the blade of the lawnmower. That, if you want any sign of the usefulness of a plant, if you believe in the doctrine of signatures at all, the survival somehow instincts of this weed show you that it's going to be very powerful and very useful. I mean, if it can actually adapt its growing conditions to grow sideways, plants aren't supposed to be able to do stuff like that. So that means yarrow is a special plant any way you look at it. And I think as we go through this book and we get into these so-called weeds, they're going to be, they're all, well, they're going to be many that we will discuss that are absolutely amazing, just like yarrow. So again, if you're interested in the book, you want to read along or have this on your shelf, which I highly recommend because, these are plants that are overlooked that could literally save your life. It is The Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast, an Herbalist Guide by Judson Carroll. Available on Amazon. If you buy it there, please leave me a good review. And if you happen to be the guy who left me a bad review and you hear this show, could you please remove it? Feel free to complain all you want that there are no pictures in it. I did say that in the description of the book. So, have a little compassion for your fellow man and the guy trying to earn an honest living by giving you something useful and knowledge you wouldn't otherwise have. And please take down your bad review. I cannot begin to tell you how much it has cost me financially since this book came out in April. Yeah, big time. So anyway, y'all, have a great week. It's still blazing hot out there. I am so looking forward to fall. I can't even, it's too hot to fish. The fish won't even bite, and I can't stand to be out there. And on a hot summer day, I'd rather be knee deep in a creek in the mountains catching trout than just about anything. And it's too hot to fish. When it's too hot to fish, for me, it's hot. Because I fished almost every day in the summer when I lived in Georgia. I mean, I caught so many catfish you would not believe it. I found 1,000 catfish recipes. And I tell you, well, I did promise I would do a recipe if I could. Smoked catfish is fantastic. A lot of people say catfish is a little too fatty. The texture of the meat's a little too soft. I totally understand that, although if you fry it correctly, it really does remedy that. Take your catfish, skin it and gut it and clean it a whole bit. You can leave it whole if it's a small one, just a couple of pounds, maybe up to 5 pounds. A big catfish you're going to want to fillet. And of course, catfish can get 60, 80 pounds. I mean, they can be that's the world record freshwater fish. There was one in Africa that was caught that was the size of a Volkswagen. But anyway, if you have one that big, I mean, gosh, actually in the PD River and down around Anson County, North Carolina, going down to Florence, South Carolina, they've caught catfish well over 100 pounds. So they are out there, seriously. So if you're going to do that, fillet it and then cut it into usable, manageable pieces, maybe, foot long and 4 inches wide or so. Rub it down with salt, pepper, Creole seasoning. That's what I use. Now, a lot of people will add sugar. I don't. I don't think it's necessary. It does help with the curing process. So it's up to you. I usually just do a salt and spice cure. A little sugar's not going to hurt anything though, and it does help pick up the smoke flavor. So just a good mixture. Rub it down, coat it. I mean, don't worry about putting too much salt on it because it's only going to absorb so much. And you're going to wipe the rest away. Put it in the fridge for a day or two. What you want to do is put it in there, kind of wrap it up, put a weight on top. It'll press the salt, will actually pull out some of the moisture, drain it off, turn it over, do it again. That's the way I do it. That's the way I do pork, so that's the way I do anything I'm going to do this way. Probably not necessary, but that is the way they do smoked salmon gravlax in the Nordic countries. So I think it works. I like to press it, and I like to get some of that moisture out of there. And then just cold smoke it when you're ready. You can actually grill it and eat it as is, but it's so much better. You can actually eat it raw because the salt has cured it. But what I'm going to say is take it, wipe off the excess salt and spices, cold smoke it, hang it in your smoker, or well, I've got instructions in my book, The Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking, about how to build a smoker. I mean, it's not that hard. You just don't want it to get over 80 degrees. And smoke it for an hour or two, taste it, it's good to go. And it's really delicious. Now, if you don't have an offset cold smoker, you can hot smoke this fish. Just keep your coals, don't get over about 200, 220 degrees, and cook it just the way you would barbecue. And no, it's not preserved that way. You'll have to go ahead and eat it. Cold smoking actually will preserve that fish for months. I still keep it refrigerated, but our ancestors did that as a way to preserve meats and fish before refrigeration. If you do that, you're going to find you probably really love catfish. The meat becomes firm. A lot of the fat will render out of it, and if you like smoked salmon, just imagine something kind of like smoked salmon, but with a white meat and some good kick of spice from some Creole seasoning. And yeah, it's good. I mean, I like it I'll eat it, just a piece of it for breakfast, put it on a salad, with lunch, or chop it up and mix in a little mayonnaise and make a smoked fish salad out of it. Little chopped pickle and make a sandwich out of that. Man, that's good stuff. I really, really like smoked fish. I smoke trout the same way. Absolutely. Trout here in the mountains of North Carolina. Only with that, I usually don't use the Creole seasoning. And I do it more like a smoked salmon or a gravlax. Sometimes I don't even smoke it. I just salt and season it with dill and fennel and some juniper berries and salt and pepper, of course, and put a little gin or vodka on there and cure it in the fridge the same way. A little sugar. I will do a little sugar on that. And, I mean, if you love, well, I love gravlax. I love smoked salmon. I love bagels with cream cheese and cured fish. I grew up around a lot of Jewish folks, so I like a lot of Jewish deli food. But yeah, super easy to smoke or salt cure fish, and it will totally change your view of how to use fish. I mean, suddenly it's you can make your own kippered herring. You'll be eating fish for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and taking it around with you like you would beef jerky. And I mean, really. Especially that smoked catfish. Definitely as good as beef jerky. And if it's cold smoked and it's salt cured, you can just carry it around and snack on it while you're hiking or out in the woods or whatever you're doing. So, all right, y'all, have a great week. I'll talk to you next time. And yeah, if you can buy my books, I really appreciate it. And again, don't forget my wooden spoons and other carvings. You can have an item, a collectible heirloom quality hand carved spoon with a note that says handwritten by me saying, this is number 3 or 4, 10 and signed by Judson Carroll. And I mean, if that matters to you, not that it does. I'm not saying anybody wants something just because my name's on it, but I think you're going to find these are really high quality and really pretty. So check that out if you're interested. Anyway you look at it, y'all. I'll talk with you next week. Good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. Have a good one.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.